Why do smart business owners still sabotage their own financial growth? Welcome to Freedom by Design. I'm Jamey Schrier. This is the podcast for practice owners who are ready to think differently about their business, take ownership of what's really holding them back, and build a business that actually sets them free. So, today I am joined by someone I have personally known for a few years now, Sean Healy. He's the founder of Accounted For. Sean works with business owners, practice owners across the country, helping them understand their numbers and actually make smarter decisions. Sean, welcome, man.
Appreciate you having me, Jamie. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you and I were at an event together the other day, last week actually, at the time of this recording, and we kind of talked about a little bit of what we were going to dive in today. And I guess my first question to kind of kick this off is you work with a lot of different practice owners, people that are at different stages of their business. Some are smaller, some are larger, some barely look at their numbers, some of them are like really understand their numbers. Um, where do you see most of them just getting it wrong when it comes to managing their finances?
So I think the number one thing that we tend to see before working with a company is a lot of people tend to manage their data to be able to fill out a tax return, right? As long as my numbers are finished by the end of the year and the CPA can file the taxes, I'm generally happy. The miss is there's a lot of different things that you can do as a business owner with that data just to make more informed business decisions. And I think that the common misconception is if it's good enough to fill out a tax return, well, then the data is fine to make decisions off of. And there's a lot more that you can do with it if approached correctly.
Okay. So I like going deep. I like getting under the surface
Let's go, Jamie.
and staying out of the tactical world that all of us can play in. And there's so much stuff. AI is great at giving you all the tactics and what you should do and all that. When you are looking at these owners' finances and you've been doing this now, I think you told me since what, 2019?
Yeah.
All right, so you're the OG of this. You have lots of years under your belt. You're looking at the financials of these owners. What is what is the difference between people that are successful as far as having very good numbers, very clean numbers, their business is doing, financially well, they're doing financially well. Like, how much of that success is actually about the tools and the tactics and even maybe the strategies versus more of their beliefs, their habits, their relationships with money? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So it's funny. I'm going to do a quick reframe here. I think the underlying thing that most successful business owners do well is they set good goals. All right. You can have all the strategy in the world. If you don't know where that strategy is taking you, you're going to start running into some problems. So I think one of the underlying themes is they all have very good, concrete goals. Whether they're reasonable or not, very different story. I personally love business owners that always have those stretch goals, but usually the more clearly defined of a goal they have, the more successful they're going to be in the long run. But the other thing is just their habits and their behavior with money is extremely important. There are a lot of business owners that are very afraid of looking at their numbers in general, let alone making decisions off of them, right? It's kind of a hear no evil, see no evil. You know, if things are going poorly in the company, there tends to be a little bit of an avoidance. When things are going really well, sometimes there can be an overconfidence. It's really interesting to me that throughout the years that we've been doing this, Uh, don't get me wrong, giving people good information is important, but really understanding the behaviors that are very common. There's a lot of human behavior that we have tendencies to lean into that might not always sometimes might defy logic, but they're very easy traps and they're very predictable of when people are going to fall into them.
Okay. So, like you, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of practice owners, and I've had them flat out say to me, some of them said, Jamey, I don't want to see my numbers. And there's a level of maybe a level of shame, a level of embarrassment. So these are emotional words. These aren't logical, rational words. Do they know they should people should have good bookkeeping numbers and good KPIs and P&L statements and all that? Do they? I've never met anyone that didn't know they should. But should is a very interesting word. We call it a dirty word inside of PFU because should is not a decisive word. Should is well, it's a hope, it's a promise, it's a might be. So, what is your experience with people that tell you, Sean, I don't want to see my numbers? Like, do you move towards like more of convincing them logically of why it's important, or do you explore some of the maybe the deeper stuff that's going on? How do you kind of handle that yourself?
So a lot of what you're talking about is the way we always frame it is it's all common sense. It's not always common practice, right? They know they need to do these things. You have to start small. All right. I'll give you a very simplistic approach that we take. Everybody knows that they should have business savings. All right. A lot of things tend to get prioritized over business savings. What we have found is there's a concept there's a behavioral concept called mental accounting that we view numbers differently based off, or we view money differently based on what it's used for. So when we turn around and say, hey, we need to be saving money, they already know that. Once again, it's common sense, but I can't afford it right now. What we have found is if we lean into that mental accounting and we put intention behind what we're saving for. So our level one is we have to save, or we have to be in the process of saving up to one payroll. Because Jamey, what is our biggest fear as business owners?
Can't make payroll.
Can't make payroll, right? So now when you label something, now there's intention behind it. You are significantly more likely to drive a positive behavior because now I know what I'm shooting for, opposed to, hey, you need a bunch of savings. You need 20,000 in the bank. You need 80,000. You can put any number down. If they don't have intention behind it, they're not going to value that money the way that they should. And if you put intention behind it and there's value behind why they're saving, it's going to start moving up the ranks from a priority perspective, at least from what we have found.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying, I mean, in psychology, it's anchoring, right? So you're anchoring an emotional connection in the action. So the action is save money. The result is you have money. But the deeper reason why that you're doing it is anchored around the fear and the anxiety that worrying about payroll causes you affects every other aspect of your life and your business. If you do this habit, which obviously you can help them do, then that will reduce that and not only help solve that issue, but it's also going to help you show up in other places without that extra fear and worry and anxiety. So anchoring that seems to be where you intentionally go with clients with that.
Yeah, and mind you, the goal is to just nudge people towards those better habits, right? There's a time and a place, and quite frankly, if you're not making enough profit, maybe saving might not be the priority, right? There's that underlying, and I think I've heard you say this a lot. There's an underlying business algorithm that needs to be producing enough profit for you to be cash flow positive. And if you don't have that current algorithm, what needs to change, right? And
Yeah.
and sometimes it's just addressing, we need to increase profit, or we need to be smarter with what we're using our profit for, hence the intentionality.
Yeah, I like the way you say nudge. Practice Freedom U, sometimes we just drag them across the line. Look, when they agree to work with us, we are all in. And sometimes there is the nudge doesn't work. You're literally saying, I'm going to drag your ass across the finish line if that's what it takes. But either way, we end up in the same spot. All
Oh,
right.
you've never been one to pull punches, so that's
No. This work that we do is too important, right? So, what are like the most common money patterns you see? Things that owners don't even realize that maybe they're doing that actually are holding them back. What are you seeing with your clients?
I would say probably number one scenario where people tend to fall short is when there's an influx of cash, right? It's called the windfall effect. So if all of a sudden you get that tax return and you get a bunch of money, most people don't put it towards savings. They tend to go and spend it. When they have that really good month and there's a bunch of money in the bank, that's when they tend to take that rather large distribution. The trap there is they're looking at their current state. The trap is they're looking at past performance, that month that already happened. They're not looking ahead to see, hey, are we taking a really big loss next month, right? We know a lot of people that had great Decembers this year. But when you look at what was coming in January, most of our clients that pay their employees biweekly had a 3 payroll month in January. Incomes tend to be at about 85% of what a normal month's projection would be due to weather, illness, and there's always carriers that just choose not to pay in the first month of the year and with like verifications, right? Everybody always takes a hit in January from an income perspective. You had a 3 payroll month. And for some clients, they had other things going on as well. We saw the loss coming. If they didn't know that loss was coming, if they were avoiding that information or didn't have forward-looking analytics to see how am I going to do, they're making decisions based off of what happened in the past or what their bank account's looking like. And it's not an all-encompassing decision. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people took a hit this January thinking they were in a lot better shape because of how December went.
Yeah. All right, you mentioned something I want to address on this real quick because I hear things back and forth on this. Payroll. What do you recommend to your clients? Do you recommend the 26 payroll period, 26 weeks? Do you recommend once a month? Do you recommend twice a month? Once a week? What do you recommend that is the best for just how you're looking at their finances, cash flow, stuff like that?
So this is a personal opinion. I like
Well, you're the expert. This is the opinion.
I like semi-monthly, meaning you pay twice a month, not every other Friday. The
Okay.
reason being, most employees tend to have bills come out on a monthly cadence. It's easier for them to budget that information. They're more likely to be saving a small amount of it into savings or putting it towards the appropriate things because it's the same cadence as how their bills are coming out.
Hmm.
Biweekly is good for a number of reasons, especially in certain states where compliance is a little bit higher. You need to track overtime, you need to track hours. Biweekly is just easier. Semi-monthly does cause some complications, but
Because things could be in midweek, stuff like that, versus a clean
yeah,
Friday's the last pay period, you're paid the following Friday. It's
and
just
some
cleaner.
and sometimes when that fifth of the month lands on a weekend, which it feels like almost every month it does, it does create a little bit of a cash flow push for earlier in the month. So there are some negatives to it, but the positives are if you pay somebody bi-weekly. Remember, we talked about when you get an influx of cash, you tend to spend it, right? That windfall effect. Your employees are doing the same thing. So when they get that 3 pay period month, which I'm sure they love it, they're probably going out and spending it. And so from a what's best for the employee, what's best for the company, you don't have to deal with those big swings. I personally, that's how I pay my employees. I personally lean into the semi-monthly. What I always tell people is if just don't start weekly because it's really hard to pay somebody weekly, then choose to pay them bi-weekly, then choose to pay them semi-monthly. If you ever wanted
Yeah.
to go from semi-monthly to biweekly, it's an easier transition across the board. But every time you're paying them longer and longer, employees tend not to be the biggest fan of that.
Yeah, and I would imagine the other reason is it creates less. Well, first of all, if you do it that way, you don't have any three payroll months because payroll is twice a month, period. I think a lot of times because we are so emotionally connected with money, like you mentioned, you and I both know Mike Michalowicz. I love the balance accounting mentality. Is we look, I used to do this. We look at the bank account. If there's money, we're in a good mood. If not, we're in a bad mood. But sometimes we're in a good mood falsely because the next month is a three payroll month. And like you said, sometimes we're like, hey, we got money. Sure. Bonuses all around. We're buying equipment. I tell my wife we're going on vacation and then not realizing the next month is three payrolls and now we're in destitute and we're closing our doors. So I think that I agree with you. If people ask me, I go, I think that twice a month is just better, not just what you said with the staff and how they pay bills, but I think it's better just normalizing the ups and downs of payroll because it is tough. Even if you do a cash flow balance and all, it is tough. You know, getting a bunch of money one month and just knowing that you have three payrolls that's just going to crush you and all that. So,
Yeah, not fun.
um, you mentioned this already because we're talking about not just the X's and O's, but also the Y's. New blog I have coming out, by the way, X's, O's, and Y's, WHY. So if we focus on the Y's, a lot of owners that I work with, and then people are people, so I'm sure you do it too. They make decisions based on fear, based on worry. Um, it's it's decisions on hiring and spending or avoiding investments or avoiding like saying things I can't afford that, which is a dangerous thing to say. Not looking at a place of investing, but always looking at everything from an expense perspective, which some people could say scarcity versus abundance. In your experience and what you've seen and what you've read and all that, what do you think, A, what do you think is driving that? And B, how should people be thinking about these things instead?
So this is a common example of a concept called loss aversion. People are twice as likely to make decisions to avoid a loss versus to get a two times that in a gain. All right. People will make decisions to avoid losses, not to get gains. So
And what does that mean in practical standpoint?
let me give you an example. The amount of people that I speak to that refuse to hire a recruiter because that the cost will be, let's call it $10,000 to go and find a person.
Hmm.
Yet when you look at the opportunity cost, by not having that person, they're generally losing, especially for a PT, they're probably losing about $10,000 a month in potential income by not having that individual. But what can they say? It's the loss of, well, this is going to hit my bank account, right? I will see this
Well,
actual.
one's a guarantee, the other is not necessarily a guarantee.
Yes, one is the potential, right? And I think a lot of times spending money. So there's a lot of research that when people spend money, it actually causes the brain interprets that as pain. So a lot
Mm.
of people tend to avoid spending money when possible. You know, when all of a sudden you see that, you know, things aren't going well or we're not making enough profit, a lot of times the first instinct is to cut cost. It's not to go out and grow into your shoes. You know, when you see somebody that doesn't have a labor KPI in line, most times it's not that you're overpaying your people. It can be that you're overpaying your people, but a lot of times you just haven't hit the scale based off of what your rent is looking like. You need to bring in more income, and that should be the focus. You need to open up your capacity, not necessarily cut and run lean. And in some cases, you have to do both. But
Yeah.
there's a yeah, it's almost like that's step one is I need to cut. And a lot of times you need to invest in your company.
Yeah, I think in my experience and having done this now 13 years of coaching and guiding, helping people, I think there's a clear across the board um, that a person that has, for lack of a better term, an abundant minded, meaning they're willing to invest, either invest in themselves or invest in their business, or like you said, they're willing to take that level of risk to hire someone knowing that that's the only way they're going to be able to grow. If not, they trap themselves. By and large, that successful people, and I don't just mean financial success, success in all aspects of their life. They not just have money, but they have time, they have a great team. They really have all of it, right? What I term as practice freedom. Those people have a view of what you said, the opposite of the loss aversion. They're about investing because they realize that's the way to grow, and they don't see the loss aversion part. Do you see that if you looked at the most successful people on the books in your world? And again, you're looking primarily at the financial aspects of things as well as the supporting KPIs. Do you see that as well, Sean, that it's a certain type of person and how they're thinking about and making those exact decisions, where it's a investment versus a cut of costs
I
mentality?
wouldn't I wouldn't say it's a type of person. I'd say it's a type of habit. It's a
Hmm.
muscle that you need to work out. And I'll tell you the big thing that I see correlate, and I'll tie it back to the answer I gave you in the beginning. It's really easy to understand the decisions you need to make and the risks that you need to make if you have defined goals. Because right now, if your current business algorithm is not going to get you to those goals, something has to change. And if you're not sure, we always view it as like a GPS. If I know where I am today and I know where I want to be, am I on the highway to get there? If not, what are the first steps? What are the decisions that need to be made to bridge that gap? Now, if I'm very risk averse, but my current model is not going to get me to that end goal, that's usually the nudge. And that's the hard truth that no matter how much I try to hide from it, I'm not going to get there in the time frame that I want to. I need to make a decision. Now the question is, which decision do we go?
So you feel that if someone, in your experience, if someone has clear goals, I want to open up another location. I want to hire three more providers. I want to take home $20,000 a month net in profit for me, the owner. If they have clear goals and they are clear in what they have to do to get them, because you're pointing that is enough for them to then begin to move forward to actually turn those goals into reality.
Yes,
Gotcha. Um, why do so many people avoid looking at their numbers?
because it's easy. Because numbers are just noise, because numbers are confusing, because accounting's a different language, because it doesn't feel good when I'm looking at a bank account that's low and a credit card that's high. There's
Yeah,
a
but
lot.
But Sean, we in school, and I come from the physical therapy world, and I'm sure this is the same as pediatrics. Maybe not as much mental health or whatever, but definitely pediatric or PT. Look, we're measuring everything. We're measuring how much your neck moves, your shoulder moves, your back moves. Now there's a lot more, AI, electronics, and scans and all that, but it's, medicine, it's all metrics. Why are we so afraid seeing the metrics of our business, even though we have tons of training of looking at metrics, saying that, hey, we need to improve range of motion this many degrees before you're able to walk properly, let's say following a total knee replacement. And yet, when we look at our business with metrics, which we should be primed and ready to do, we don't. Explain to me that, my friend.
One's familiar, one's not. Right? Here's the weird thing, and this is a behavior piece that we see constantly. Status quo, even if you're not in a good scenario, is comfortable. Change is not comfortable. And that's a lot of times why. But I'm sure you've had plenty of patients that the process of PT I wouldn't always call a comfortable process. There's a reason why some people drop off, right? Part of the
Hmm.
reason why physical therapists do so well, and it's they have a ton of experience and they know what they're doing, but they're also an accountability partner to get the person through, you know, whatever it is they need to get through to get better. Most people don't have an accountability partner when it comes to looking at their numbers. And even if they take the time, put the energy in, and put the effort in, if they don't know what to do with that information, they're going through all this pain and they don't know if it's making things better or not. So, what happens? There's a lot of things that happen in the business that are a little more urgent. You know, looking at your numbers and your finances is important. Once it gets urgent, they'll make a change and they'll make a decision because they don't have a choice anymore. But there's other things that are urgent that a lot of times don't hurt as much or are more in their realm of control that they're going to prioritize. It's a rather typical behavior. It's a rather
Yeah, the idea of urgent versus like important. And when something is urgent and important or critical, we better make a move on it. Sometimes things are urgent, but it's not necessarily the highest priority. And there's something that's the highest priority that we're not thinking it's urgent. So there's that whole matrix of that, which I'm probably,
seven habits of highly effective
yeah,
people. If it's important and urgent, do it. If it's important and not urgent, schedule it. If it's not urgent and it's if it's not urgent, important, schedule it. If it's
it's not
urgent,
important,
not
but
important,
urgent.
delegate it. Otherwise, just get it out of your brain. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
we teach that to
So,
our everybody on our staff because that's a tough habit and a tough self realization to constantly like keep on top of.
right. So we have lots of practice owners, entrepreneurs, healthcare people listening to this, and they're not as clear, as confident on their finances as they should be. Um, what's one shift that they can do of how they think about money that could immediately change how they run their business? What's your best tip that you give to your best clients?
I'm going to go back to setting goals, but I'm going to be a little more specific here. Know how much you need to pay yourself. There's a couple ways you can go about that, but know what the end goal is of what you should be paying yourself. Know how much your debt is impacting your cash flow and have a goal for what you need to start saving. You need to make profit in excess of that number. I think a lot of individuals tend to lean on, I need a 20% profit margin. You know, it's what we see a lot of consultants, a lot of finance professionals, a lot of books. Do you need 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%? I would say make sure that you truly understand to the dollar how much profit you need to be cash flow positive. Because one of the worst feelings and one of the biggest things we see where people feel they're losing control is when their accountant is telling them that they're profitable every single year, but they still can't make tax payments. They still have a ton of debt that they can't seem to chip away at. They feel like they're not paying themselves. There is a profit target that every business owner should have that is unique based off of their particular company and their particular goals. Until you know those goals, you do not know your profit number. So I'd
Yeah.
say start with that goal, work your way back. And if you feel like you're getting in your own way, I promise you, you are not alone.
Yeah. No, I like that. There's two things that I like to look at it with that when people ask, and I go, number one, you should be profitable every step of the way. The minute you open your practice, you better be profitable in 90 days because chances are it's just you. So you should be profitable because your overhead better be low. Later on, you start hiring people, make sure those people are properly utilized and you're properly collecting your money. What I see so often is the opposite, is we're going to be profitable later. Once we hire a couple more people, then we'll be profitable. And I was like, if you're not profitable now, whatever those habits are that's creating you not to be profitable are the same habits you're going to have later. So I love that, what you said. And then the second one is, I love, what is that number that you want? Like, I know for me, that number originally back in the day was $10,000 a month. I need that in my household. Well, guess what? I'm also going to pay tax on that money. So I actually need more than 10,000 total because partly is tax and all that. So really thinking about what that number is for you and then create the business model and know exactly what your KPIs need to be to produce that, because anything over is going to put you in a different place. But if, like you said, if you're not making money to take care of your family, your livelihood, nothing will help you make worse decisions than the emotion that comes with a lack of money. Love that, man. Hey, Sean, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you accounted for?
Yeah, so feel free to reach out to me. My email address is shealy, Healy, at accountedforllc.com, or go to accountedforllc.com, the number four.
Absolutely. We'll have a link in the show notes about that. Thank you so much for being here. And if something resonated with you today, don't just listen, do something with it. And if you want clarity of what's actually happening in your business, not just what you think is happening, then my recommendation is take the growth assessment. That is a assessment that we've created at Practice Freedom U. It'll show you exactly where to focus next. And if this episode helped you, share it with another practice owner. Be a giver. They may be exactly what they need to hear, and they will thank you for it. Thanks for listening. I'm Jamey Schrier, and this is Freedom by Design.